Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being with us tonight and welcome. We're going to start with one question about the justice. That's a very important issue. European Union gave a very strong support to the new law for prosecution. How do you see that expectations that you had then, now, after 3 years?
Благодарам, Катерина. Ви посакувам успех во новата сезона.
Благодариме. Повелете.
Of course, we have been always very much invested and followed very closely progress in the rule of law. And now that we've opened negotiations and the screening process is underway, that attention is even more urgent, more focused, redoubled. And our focus on progress on the rule of law during the accession process, as you probably know, will be at every stage throughout the process, beginning to the very end. And that focus is not just about how far the country has aligned with the laws that exist within the European Union, but also, are they implemented? Who is implementing them? How are they implementing? Do they have the capacity? And if they're not implemented, how are they being enforced? So it's a very in-depth exercise, or if you like, a kind of laser focus on rule of law issues and corruption, a number of issues throughout the entire process. Now, the European Union and its member states have engaged a huge amount of technical expertise and financial assistance in the area of rule of law, including the prosecutors. And so we expect, as ordinary citizens would expect, for there to be results from that assistance. What do I mean by results? Well, in the area of rule of law, I mean quite simply that there is a class of judges and prosecutors who are professional and independent, who act with integrity, free from political influence or financial incentive, and thereby there is public confidence in the judiciary and the prosecution and the rule of law more generally. Well, we are not there. Yes, there has been some achievements, important achievements on the road in the progress on the rule of law, but much more is needed. In fact, what we need is decisive action in the area of the rule of law to address some of these key issues.
I understand, but my question was more in terms of SPO cases that you expected to be concluded in a way and to be taken up from this new prosecutor office that was established.
So let's focus on the office of the office of the prosecutor concerning corruption and organized crime. Yes, we have invested in that a great deal. What we expect from that office, what we expect from the new head of the office, is that that office will pursue its work with determination and professionalism in the same way that we expect across the rule of law. It's of course, there has been great public concern expressed about the way in which the process of election has happened. That is a concern. But what we need now is for that office to deliver. In the area of corruption, there are many actors. You've mentioned one very important, the office, and we want to see it continue its work, in particular to ensure that those cases which are transferred from the Special Prosecutor's Office are advanced. But I'd also like to mention that there are many other actors, and in particular there are some institutions and some individuals who are playing an important role in progressing on reform. I think, for example, our country report has referred to the State Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, or the State Audit Office. They are both playing a positive role. But even there, we have to ask the question, why is it that the recommendations of those bodies are not followed up systematically? So we need to expect a great deal.
You mentioned the State Commission for Fight Against Corruption. Maybe the way how people were elected there was also a positive example. And with the election of the head of this prosecutor, actually there was quite the opposite. So your American colleague, she had a pretty strong statement against this process. And your office also had a statement. Some of my colleagues estimated as mild. I know that you don't want to interfere in commenting the particular cases, but in general, do you think that we as society, we have the luxury of improvising with this fight, that you also mentioned how important it is?
I think I've just expressed our disappointment at the speed of progress in the rule of law, even though there have been some achievements. And I've just said to you that, of course, it's important the process, however, whether judges, whether prosecutors, is important for public confidence. What we expect, once again, to be clear, is that the new head of the office should ensure that the office delivers in terms of its determination, professionalism, and advancing the cases with which it deals. But I agree with you, the whole issue of corruption and organised crime, but corruption in particular, needs to be addressed in a systematic way. That's why I mentioned the work of the State Commission and the need for follow-up. That's why I mentioned the Audit Office, the need for a follow-up of their recommendations. Let me also just use the opportunity, as you're a journalist, to also highlight the valuable work that journalists can play in this, in particular some of the investigative journalists, some of your colleagues that I'm sure you know. Everyone has a role to play. Of course, the leading role is that of the government, but we all have roles to play as well.
Let's focus on the leading role. How important is the political will? Now I'm going to put this in a different context with Bulgaria and all these daily political battles that we're witnessing between political parties. Do you think that we do not focus enough on the substance of the process of negotiations?
In order to join the European Union, the focus now has to be on reforms, a transformation of the country, because without that transformation, the country will not be able to join the European Union. In practice, that means looking at almost every area of activity, from agriculture to trade, from corruption to statistics, from human rights to rule of law. And it means ensuring that there is progress in all of these areas. This is a huge task, but it can be achieved, and there are many other examples of where it has been achieved. But it relies on a number of things. First of all, it should be, this process of accession should be a national project. It should bring together, there should be support for it across the political divide, across the political parties, nationally and in Parliament. And we're not really seeing that at the moment. But that's essential.
Yes, but the responsibility for that is both ways. I mean,
the responsibility relies on everyone.
Yes.
And the point here is that during a process of accession, it's normal that there will be changes of government. And that process needs to be secured throughout. The second condition, which is important for the success of these negotiations, is that the entire civil service is focused on delivering on these reforms. So that means an engagement from all of the civil service, but also local authorities and other actors. They all need to be very focused on putting through reforms. Because as I've said to you, it's not just about alignment, it's about actually implementing them in practice. And I'm sure viewers will appreciate the importance of that distinction. The third thing is, and this comes back to this idea of a national project, it needs to involve everyone. Yes, the government of the day needs to lead. Yes, Parliament has a leading role as well. Yes, it needs political consensus, but it also will involve local authorities, it will involve civil society, journalists such as yourself, business, very important, and ordinary citizens. So these are all necessary in order to move this process forward. So yes, in answer to your question, it needs considerable political will across the political divide, supported by a great deal of investment, of time and energy and expertise. We will be there every step of the way, but the pace and the determination is very much in your hands.
How do you evaluate the screening process and how this process can help actually in everything you mentioned?
No, the screening process, it has two parts to it. First of all, it happens in Brussels. So the teams from here, from the ministries, etc., and other institutions travel to Brussels and meet with the experts that are there from the European Commission. It's a very significant engagement. And the first step is what we call the explanatory screening, whereby the European Commission explains what the laws and practices are in the European Union, how they've developed in recent years, and what the expectations are. The second part is what we call bilateral screening, which is very intensive, and the main focus is on the authorities here. And that is looking at, in depth, where the country is on the different reforms in the different sectors, legislation, implementation, enforcement, capacities, where the gaps are, trying to identify, if you like, what needs to be done to bring the country up to the standards of the European Union in order to join. Now, the good news is that this process is going very well. I have to say, the side of the experts from North Macedonia, they're very engaged, they're very well prepared.
Motivated, probably,
motivated
after all these years.
Motivated after all these years, you're quite right. Some people have waited a long time.
Yeah.
But asking the right questions, being very open. So we're, so far, still in the process, we're very pleased with that engagement. It's really important that the experts, the government, the civil servants use the momentum that we are now seeing for the screening, but it's also important that the population at large, civil society, business, others, use this opportunity to push forward for reforms. So it's good news.
That's good. I want to raise a question about the freedom of speech, something that we really care about as journalists, but also you as a mission. In the summer, during the heat of the debate for a so-called French proposal, we witnessed a labeling of journalists and also people from NGOs because they criticize or they disagree with this proposal.
We publish every year a country report on North Macedonia and the other countries in the region, prepared by the European Commission. The last one was in October. That found that the general context was conducive to critical media reporting. That's good. That's a fundamental. But it did have a number of concerns. It was concerned that there had been only limited progress in advancing on reforms during the year. It expressed concerns at, for example, a number of different issues, but just to name a few, at the lack of transparency or in terms of advertising by political parties and the state. It expressed concerns about the need to support the public service broadcaster to ensure its independence, financial sustainability, but also to complete the process of the appointment of the Programming Council.
It also structural reforms.
Structural reforms, but it also referred to the rights of journalists and mentioned also the need to ensure that where there are threats or indeed violence against journalists, there needs to be a swift response. So a number of issues are touched in it.
You know why I'm asking you this? Because when an official, a prime minister, a minister, goes in public and he said something like this, it provokes or motivates organized structures on social media, internet, to attack journalists even more.
So let's be clear. I mean, journalists, freedom of expression, freedom of media is absolutely fundamental. We even have, we all have issues. There are issues here and in the European Union, and they need to be addressed, because without that, you do not have an open and free society. This is fundamental. Journalists and the media need to ensure the highest levels of professionalism and make sure that they're really able to inform the public. That's important. They need to have their independence and criticize that. And of course, criticize us as well.
Yes.
Quite rightly so.
But you never went to public to attack us in that way.
But at the same time, what is also important is that the political class, political leaders, also leaders in the European Union, should always respect the importance of the freedom of the media and the job that journalists have to do, which often is very difficult and often in an environment which can be very politically charged. And we really rely upon the work that you do, that your colleagues do, to ensure what the most important thing, that the public gets clear, independent information, not fake news.
How do you comment this famous Article 102 and the amendments?
This is the law which concerns the possibility of funding for campaigns, including political campaigns.
And you are concerned about transparency in
Indeed, yes. No, I mean, we've been clear on this law. I went out publicly. Two things we would say about it. First of all, when you're going to make changes to the law, particularly in this area, which is very sensitive, you need to consult with the relevant stakeholders. That's essential. Second thing, any changes to the law, especially now as we've opened negotiations, need to be made taking into account the norms, the legal norms and practices that are there in the European Union. So we have said, we were therefore, I would say, dismayed to see Parliament deciding to treat the issue in shortened procedure. Because as we've said before in country reports, the use of this fast-track procedure reduces the scope for discussion, exactly when we believe that there should be a much more in-depth discussion, and it's also during the screening process, during the accession negotiations, when the country should be converging with EU standards, not running the risk of divergence.
It's not only the media that are affected by these amendments, but also the cultural field. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. Creative Europe's a great program. It's fantastic. It's actually has a budget of about 4.2 billion euros in the European Union with partners, and this country has been participating in it. It has two elements to it. One dealing with culture, in particular supporting innovation and creative industries, and one dealing with media. Now, in regards to the media side, of course, we are having discussions with the government on this, but
Yes.
in order to be able to participate in the media side, we need to ensure that the laws are aligned with the European Union standards, including here the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. And that's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we are having discussions about this. There is a concern about alignment. But this comes back to the bigger issue which we've just talked about. Changes to
Yes.
this law, which is a complex law, the law dealing with audio-visual media and visual media, is complex. It raises important issues, again, about consultation and important issues about standards, because this touches on some of our fundamental freedoms. So again, the call is to ensure consultation with stakeholders and make sure that whatever is done to the law, that it's in line with EU standards. We're in the screening process. We'll be discussing, actually next week, we'll be discussing some issues of media freedom, and in March we'll be doing a deep dive into the issues of audiovisual. I don't want to see us having a discussion in March about why, during the screening process, rather than converging, the country is actually diverging in this area.
Yes, you're paying a lot of attention in the field of culture. You as a mission, but also you, and we're very grateful as a country for all of your support and investment, especially in the protection of national heritage. Can you tell us more about the projects that you're doing as a mission? I'm going to give you space here because I think it's important.
Yeah, well, thanks. Look, you know, from day one when I arrived in this country, what struck me is how the great wealth and diversity of the culture that you have here, whether it's architecture, fine art, music, literature, it's a very rich culture. What does that mean? That's a great asset. That means that's something which will draw in, of course, tourism, will draw in investments for the creative industries, which really need to be supported. But also, it's something that you bring and will bring to the European Union when you join as part of this rich, common European heritage that we have. So it's a real tremendous support. But it's, you know, it is struggling and it needs support. And I think there are a number of things that need to be done to support it. First of all, of course, the government and the state, the Ministry of Culture and the different agencies that deal with it, they have a very important role to play. They need to be strengthened and they need to ensure that their maximum efficiency and professionalism in all they do. But secondly, it's not just about government. This is what's so interesting about this area. It's very much an area of partnerships. If you look at the European Union, we have any number of partnerships in European Union member states. Partnerships with government, yes. With the EU, yes. But with local authorities, with business, with civil society organizations, or local initiatives by local citizens which have chosen something to preserve or to value. So it's, and of course with the arts world as well. So this is another area where it needs to be developed, the partnerships. And the third thing I would say where it's really important that we put a focus is on education. Because if we want to preserve the rich culture and heritage that this country undoubtedly has, young people need to open their eyes, have their eyes opened and see it. They need to see, yes, the brutalist architecture here in Skopje, the lotus, the post office. It's a lotus rising out of the city, symbolizing the recovery of the city from the 1963 earthquake. It's magnificent. Or the beautiful frescoes that you can see in Ohrid, or you can see in Staro Nagoričine, or in many churches. The beautiful, delicate churches that you see across the country, and mosques too. These are all real assets. The songs, the dance, all of these things which people, I think, need to respect. So, from the European Union's perspective, we see this as an opportunity to engage and to encourage and to support and share the experiences that we have in the European Union. Because by sharing experiences, we help to ensure the sustainability of the sector, its innovation and creativity. I also would like to just highlight the amazing variety of artists that you have in this country, artists in the broader sense, from all sorts of media, who need encouragement, who need support. And who are terrific. So this really provides, I think our support is aimed at encouraging them, but also building bridges between the member states of the European Union and the country itself through culture. And you have achievements as well. I think it was good work that's been done by the National Gallery recently. You have the two beautiful hammams, Çifti and the Daud Pasha, which are wonderful exhibition places. We're seeing the development of Mala Stanica, and I very much hope that our latest collaboration will also be successful, which is the Museum House of Lazar Lichinowski, which I recommend to your viewers. Just walk in front of it and look at the beautiful mosaic that you see, the apotheosis of
That's
labor.
nice. Let's finish the interview with a slightly wider perspective. Everything we talked about comes to the point of our European future. We witness a really hard year with this Russian aggression on our continent, and also these tensions that we are witnessing on the north of Kosovo, our neighbors. How do you think that these tensions and this aggression is reflecting on the enlargement policy?
I mean, I agree with you. The last 9 months have demonstrated that in Europe we cannot take ever security and freedom for granted.
Maybe we thought we could, but...
Maybe we thought we could,
yes,
but
apparently.
it's clearly not the case. Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war against Ukraine has shown that Vladimir Putin wants to tear up the international law rule book and rely upon force to gain his way. And we see now a further stage in the war during winter where Russia is targeting civilians by attacking infrastructure which is essential for water, heating and power. Now in that context, I think it's become clearer than ever that we need to be together. That means the Western Balkans and the European Union, because together it is the best guarantees for security, peace, democracy and prosperity. The European Union has been very clear that the commitment to the enlargement perspective for the Western Balkans is very much alive. It's very solid. And I think you will see in a week's time or so, there will be the summit in Tirana between the leaders of the European Union and the leaders of the Western Balkans, where they will once again reaffirm this very strong commitment to the EU future of these of the Western Balkans.
Is that future possible? Sorry for interrupting, but is that future possible without some internal reforms of the Union? Or it's a parallel process, or it's a...
There are two different things. I think the EU has been very clear on what is needed. Let's take this case. This country, it's very clear about the reform path that needs to be followed in order to reach the European Union. And that is the basis upon which we will judge, and that's the basis on which the promise is made. The conversations about reform in the European Union are natural. I mean, we live in a very fast-moving and developing world. we are a union of 27 member states. It is natural that there are discussions about whether the extent to which the current structures and processes are fit for purpose. Not least, given the context that we are in now and what we've seen from Russia's war in Ukraine, it's very clear that these countries need to join the European Union. The path to join the European Union is very, very clear. There is always a nervousness, I think, in the region. I understand it.
Yes.
What is going
Natural.
on? This happened when we had the European political community. Do you remember? As soon as this was raised, there were voices saying, oh, but this is an alternative to this, is a backroom, this is a backward step. What happened? We had a meeting of the European political community with everyone there. It was an excellent opportunity for everyone to come together, to talk together about important issues. And all of that discussion about this being, oh, it's an alternative to accession, that died away because they saw that this is real. And I think you can follow this. This is real. The process is important. What we need now is the political determination to implement reforms. That's where the focus is needed in order to bring this country into the European Union as soon as possible.
Thank you very much for the interview and for this message for the end.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.